Um, as a consequence of what has been happening in the world and with COVID and the reduction in supplies all over the place and the degradation of environmental problems, whether it has to do with flooding, it has to do with fire, it has to do with drought, whether it has to do with war, it certainly is having an impact on the world. And we thought it would be useful as a commission to begin the discourse on this very important discussion. And that is why we have invited our esteemed participants, sorry, or esteemed presenters to be a part of this meeting here this afternoon, because we know that you are bringing to the discourse a lot of information and insights about the topic which we are discussing. So we look forward to a very, I would say, lively debate, but we just don't want to leave it there. We're hoping that recommendations can emerge from the discussion, which we, as a commission, we are required to present reports to Parliament from time to time. So we're hoping that all these sessions we've had, we combine one report and send it to the Parliament for consideration. So it is not as if what we're discussing here will be in vain, but it is also useful for us to be able to share with our stakeholders and to encourage them to understand that food security is very important to us. And nonetheless, you know, sometimes we think that Guyana is a breadbasket and we have a lot of food, but we also are seeing some challenges which have emerged, and the cost of not only production, but the cost of the produce itself when you go out there in the market. We know there are things that are seasonal, but all of these impact on the cost of living and our way of life. Hence, I believe we need to talk about this and hope that our viewers, our stakeholders can share the information so that we can all begin to do a little more for ourselves. Certainly, some of us may have the possibility to do more and others may not, but at the end of the day, we would like everyone to be a part of this process to ensure that there is food for our families. So I would perhaps at this time say that we have Ms. Renata Chakasan, who was a former commissioner, but now she is our CEO, and we're very happy to have her. Commissioner Sandra Hooper, who is a valued and I would say committed commissioner to us. I haven't seen any other commissioners as yet, but let me thank our commissioners, and I want to say that we're very, very pleased that our speakers for today have taken that decision to be a part of this, what I consider an important discussion. So over to you, CEO.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so unfortunately, I've just received word that Professor Francis cannot make it today. However, she made arrangements, and I don't know if I would say arrangements, but she certainly put some stuff in place. She's asked Dr. Melissa Eiffel to fill in for her, so we are grateful for that. I know we'd had the discussion about Melissa doing a presentation earlier, and I didn't get back to Melissa, so I do apologize for that. But I certainly am appreciative that Professor Francis reached out to her. And so we will certainly have the gender perspective on food security this evening, and I'm therefore grateful to Melissa for this. Okay, food security is an important aspect of life, human life particularly, because I know as Guyanese, we always, food is important to us. And therefore, when we can't get food, things become, as an old broadcaster used to say, chaotic. The definition of food security, of course, is as defined by the United Nations Committee on World Food Security, means that all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their food preferences and dietary needs, such that they can enjoy a productive and healthy life. A family that is food secure when its members do not live in hunger or fear of hunger. For decades, as we know, the Caribbean has been over-reliant on expensive food imports. The World Bank estimates that between 80 and 90% of all food consumed in this region comes from abroad. There are only 3 countries in the Caribbean that produce more than 50% of their own food, and Guyana is one of those countries. The other countries are Belize and Haiti. Now, the pandemic has highlighted the fragility of regional supply chains. Sea freight costs and delays have increased. The cold storage chain was under pressure. Farmers reported a lack of supplies. But I should say none of this should be new to the region, because our region often suffers from frequent disruptions based on our weather peculiarities, like hurricanes. But after months of reduced income, tourism for most of the islands, and having food reserves dwindling, food prices have become a serious and prolonged concern for much of the population. So, based on this, the Commission had decided that maybe food security was an important topic to discuss, particularly as we're now emerging, hopefully, fingers crossed, from the pandemic. And we're already noticing the cost of food going up and people are becoming concerned. Jobs, of course, are not as they used to be before. A lot of people are having to pivot. So it is under this backdrop that we want to have this particular panel discussion. Allow me to introduce our speakers for those that I have bios for. And I should stop sharing my screen, one of the screens at least, because it wouldn't. Right. I will allow the speakers to be able to show their presentations. So with us this evening, we have Mr. Sean Baugh. He is, of course, the Program Manager for Agriculture and Agri-Industrial Development at the CARICOM Secretariat. And he took this position in 2019. Before that, he was the Principal Director for Economic Planning and Policy at the Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Agriculture and Fisheries in Jamaica. And he had that position from 2015 to, I guess, 2019. He was also, and before that, he was Director of Corporate Planning and Monitoring and Evaluation for the Rural Agricultural Development Authority of Jamaica. Mr. Baugh holds a Master's in Agriculture and Rural Development from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. He also has a Bachelor's in Management Studies and Political Science from the University of the West Indies, from Mona. And he has several certifications in community development, project management, and agricultural development. Mr. Baugh has a special interest in farming, rural development, sports research, youth development, agribusiness, and policy development. And I'd like to thank him for making the time to make a presentation to us this evening. I also want to go ahead and introduce our other speaker, Ms. Paris. And Ms. Paris, of course, is a lecturer at the Guyana School of Agriculture. For the past 16 years, she has molded students of the Guyana School of Agriculture into creating their own employment. Using food processing, she has been their guide in creating new foods that are quick and easy to prepare. Food safety is vital, and she has instilled a culture of food safety, not only in the classroom, but in her students as well. As a lecturer and manager of the Guyana School of Agriculture Food Agro-Processing Facility, Ms. Paris teaches food science and food agro-processing, inclusive of product development. She has been encouraging students to be creative with local raw materials, to create new foods, and they have delivered in many ways. Many of us have come to know pepper jelly. They've got dried soups, dried coconut flakes. But she's particularly proud of the students who created a sweet potato cake mix. That product is now in supermarkets. Ms. Paris attended St. Rose's High School. Then she went on to the Guyana School of Agriculture to complete a diploma in agriculture. She then went on to the University of Guyana where she did her bachelor's, and then she followed that with a master's in agricultural diversification from the University of the West Indies. The third speaker is Dr. Melissa Eiffel. She, of course, is the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana. And she's been well known in women's issues, and she's a historian, but she's certainly well placed to provide us with the gendered perspective on food security. Mr. Ba, I'm going to ask you to go first, be followed by Ms. Paris, and then we will go to Dr. Eiffel. If that's okay with you.
No problem whatsoever. Let me first say good afternoon to everybody, and also express my pleasure to have been asked to present at this webinar or to be a part of the panelists. I feel really humbled and really overjoyed to be here today to be discussing a matter that is dear to my heart and something that I speak about every day, which is food security, and even more important in the context of the role that certainly our esteemed females and women play in the process. I think this is timely for us because as a region, we're now at a turning point. We're at a position where food and nutrition security is at the forefront. It has been talked about by every head of government within the CARICOM setup. We have set ourselves an ambitious target of reducing our food import bill by 25% by the year 2025. And Madam Moderator, you would have made mention of some of the challenges which exist within our food import bill. It is true that a majority of the food that is consumed in the region comes from extra-regional sources. And again, only 3 of the 15 member states of CARICOM can boast being anywhere close to food secure. And that's Guyana, Belize, and Suriname, based on the levels of import and production which takes place within these member states. It's important to know that we have developed a comprehensive program that is targeted to increasing the level of intra-regional production for primary agricultural products, also increasing the value chain, and also, which is more critical, increasing the wealth and the level of income generated to our population. And a key plank of that is the inclusion and greater involvement of women in the food system / food security and the agricultural sector. It's important to note that women in relation to food security is influenced based on their geographical region, religion, social class, age, and ethnicity. Similarly, we have to acknowledge that women play a significant role as it relates to food and nutrition security. And in particular, the 4 pillars. Madam Moderator, you would have spoken about it in your opening remarks, and it has to do with availability, accessibility, utilization, and stability. But with the increasing role, an important role that women play in food security, and particular food security in the Caribbean region, there are still some disadvantages which exist, and certainly some gaps. Certainly, women are disadvantaged due to the fact they do not have access to some opportunities or resources as men, owing to stereotyped issues based on gender. And these are manifested in the areas of owning of assets or certain resources such as land, energy, technology, loans, pesticides, fertilizers, and others. Women have more limited access to training, information, public services, and social protection in some of the areas within the CARICOM region. Now, if we are to agree that women play a critical role and substance in their communities, we also have to agree that sometimes it goes not acknowledged at the level that it's supposed to be. Certainly, when we speak about food and nutrition security, unfortunately, what comes out in the studies and in the discussions has to do with just domestic related matters. But based on research that has been done, women play a far greater role in some of these areas more than men. For example, women keep the household going. They're the ones who determine the nutritional status of the household. Certainly we men, when we go and buy, we pick up and go. But certainly in terms of nutrition security, the woman of the household looks at the nutritional value of a meal. So you just don't get something to eat, but you get a nutritional meal. Similarly, as it relates to commerce in the household, women play a greater role as it relates to operating and managing the financing within the household. And I'll give you an example that I experienced recently here in Guyana, in Parika. I was out on farm visits and I was with a farm family. And every decision that that household made was made by the female, the wife of the family, of the house, or the husband, better yet. And it became telling because each decision or each recommendation that was made to the husband, he would turn to his wife and say, "What do you think?" And she would articulate it in such a manner that the decision made sense. So again, it says to us that today we have to create better opportunities for women in the area of food security and being able to carry out a more, what should I say, formative role in relations to contribute in the agricultural sector. And I have a few suggestions and recommendations. I know I don't have forever to speak, so I'm trying to be as succinct as possible. But before I go there, I want to point out some of the findings that we recently found in a survey that we did in collaboration on the World Food Program in the Caribbean. And this was done as a livelihood study for the impact of COVID-19 on livelihoods, and in particular households within the CARICOM setup. And I'll just highlight 3 or 4 findings. And this has a direct relation to food and nutrition security. 1/3 of the people who reported challenges in accessing markets in a week prior to the survey, primarily due to the fact there was lack of financial resources. Respondents also increasingly reported buying cheaper and less preferred foods in smaller quantities than usual. Nearly half of the lower income respondents reported having no food stocks at home. Another finding, the pandemic continues to impact people's livelihood. Half of the respondents face disruptions in their livelihood 2 weeks prior to before we did the survey. While we found that this was in line to previous survey, the reasons for the disruptions have shifted.
Audio.
The predominant reason
Microphone.
The predominant reason is that increased prices of livelihood inputs and the less so movement restrictions or fear of illnesses. Finally, while I get to my recommendations, more people reported skipping meals and eating less preferred foods compared to 1 year ago. Lowest income households were more likely to resort to negative coping strategies. Respondents are resorting to more severe actions, with 70% drawing on savings to meet their immediate needs having to do with food and health. And that has brought us to a tipping point within the region as it relates to food security. I say that to bring into context that the findings of our survey indicate that we're in a position in the region where we have to really take, and I've said before, take stock of our food and nutrition security, look at what is happening, and certainly women will play a greater role in this. And these are my recommendations in order to do that. One, we have to move towards empowering women. And how do we do that? We have to have a participatory spaces that allow the equal participation of women in identifying specific actions and to promote their role in agriculture. Two, improving access to productive activities for women. And this means giving opportunities such as incentives, access to loans, access to land, access to the means of capital for them to be, for women to play a greater role as it relates to agricultural production, agricultural development. And three, incentivization and adoption of advanced technology. And what do I mean by this? Technology is the way to go in agriculture. It is the only way. And in order for us to make it a little bit more equitable, a little bit more profitable, it must be one that we promote the use of technology, and certainly among our women population. And finally, I am putting forward that we need to increase our data collecting ability, so we can better account for women involvement in rural areas, in agriculture, and in the food system. It's my view that if we're able to do this, we are better able to put forward policies, programs, projects, and actions that will bring the type of returns, rewards, and development that we want to see, certainly for our female population in relation to rural development and agriculture. I will pause there because I know we'll have the panel discussion and allow the other panelists to also get involved in the discussion. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Appreciate it. And I know that you folks have questions and comments. I'm going to ask you to please hold that, make a note of it. And at the end, once the third speaker is completed, then we will open up the floor for discussion. Thank you for your cooperation. Ms. Paris, the floor is now yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
We good like hearing you.
Okay.
Yes.
Could I share my screen? Could you allow me to share my screen?
We're not hearing anything.
I asked if you can allow me to share my screen, and I'm waiting on that. If that's not possible, then okay, give me a second to. Okay. Yes, good afternoon again, everyone. Food security.
Want to put that in presentation mode?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're looking at the importance of gender equality in achieving food security, and I took the angle of women in agriculture. And so food and agriculture sector has been the main contributor to economic development in Guyana, including the generation of employment and enterprise development for women and men. In 2020, agriculture, forestry, and fisheries contributed 16.9% of Guyana's GDP and employed the largest section of the Guyana workforce. Could you change the screen because I don't seem to have. Could you go to the next slide? Or can I do that because I'm not Hello?
You should be able to because you're now host.
Yes, but nothing
So
is happening at
it's
oh.
not doing it.
Sorry, sorry about
Okay.
that. Yes, yes, it just
And
did.
you need to speak
Okay,
up because they're complaining that they're not hearing you clearly.
oh, all right.
Hmm.
Um, so can you hear me now? Yes, our culture is critical to the livelihoods of poor households and provides food security and nutrition to Guyanese in on all walks of life, and not only in Guyana but in internationally as well. The food and agriculture sector has been the main contributor to the economic development in Guyana, including the generation of employment and enterprise development for both men and women. And the Guyana government has adopted in 2018 the National Gender and Social Inclusion Policy document, which provides orientations to combat gender equalities in all aspects relevant to the development of the country, including the agriculture sector. The Ministry of Agriculture is continually working to ensure that there is a gender component in its programs and projects and allows for gender equality. There are clear commitments to gender excuse me. There are clear commitments to gender mainstreaming at a high level, reflected in specific commitments within guiding policy documents like the ones such as this, the National Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Policy.
Ms. Paris, sorry to interrupt. Is it possible for
Uh-huh.
you to increase the microphone level on your computer?
I have it to the highest. I
Oh,
have it to the highest.
okay.
Um, so I don't know what this time of the evening at my end the bandwidth seems to go, and so I
Mm.
really can't do
You
anything
have,
about it.
right. Do you have earphones that maybe have a microphone?
Yes, it has,
Okay,
and
that's actually better. That's better.
all right. So can you hear me better? I don't know how to use the ear. I have the earpiece in, so I'm
Mhm.
hearing you, but I don't know if I have to press this or what.
No, no,
Okay.
no. You just hold it closer to your mouth and we're
Okay.
hearing better. Right.
You're
Thank
hearing me
you.
better now?
Much better, much better. Thanks
Okay.
a lot. Hmm.
Okay. Yes. So luckily what I was saying is on the screen so we can all read it. Yes. Oh, what's happening here
Don't forget, don't drop your hand again.
now? Okay, I wouldn't. Ah, I don't know. I'm free. I don't know what's happening with my screen. Okay. Yes, our women farmers have been involved in agricultural activities all aspects of agriculture, including crops, poultry, and now we're seeing a lot more activity in the agro-processing activities, and that is growing is a growing area of entrepreneurial development in Guyana. Many women are involved in these activities that add value to the staple agricultural crops and creating new products. Um, at, at Guyana School of Agriculture, that is one thing that I think we have a handle on, where my students have to develop new products from those same old materials, and you would be surprised what they come up with in a short space of time. Female farmers carry equal loads to men and continue to overcome the many challenges they are faced with, but by being innovative. The government is working to ensure that women are empowered and have the resources needed available to them as they continue to contribute to this very important sector. We are not only looking at our women on the coastland, but it is also happening in the hinterland, where there's the hinterland in the environmentally sustainable agricultural development project. This project, the objective of this is to improve livelihood resilience through income generation, access to assets, improve nutrition, and adaptation to climate variability. One of the main focus of the project is achieving the objective of is to target female-headed households, and to this end, we have a 50% of the beneficiaries are women. And this is just a list of the women in Region 1 at Mabura and Moruka, all the different um, female-headed groups that are in the hinterland. There are 22 women's groups in Region 1 and 18 in Region 9. And so that makes up the complement of the hinterland region. And so we can see the women here are being trained in different aspects of agro-processing and other endeavors. The Region 9, there are 18 of the groups in Region 9 to have a total of 40 women's groups in total in the hinterland. This is another, this is just a picture showing some women hard at work and just getting the job done. I thank you.
Next step.
You could probably mute, okay, yeah.
Thank
You want some
you.
rice?
Yes.
No, I don't wish any rice. Thanks. Not right now. Sorry, could everybody mute their mic if you're not going to be speaking?
My mic is muted.
Okay, thank you. So our next speaker, of course, is Dr. Melissa Eiffel, and she will bring it home for us. Over to you, Melissa.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. All protocols haven't been observed. Please let me first apologize on Professor Patsy Francis's behalf. She was in the field today. She got caught up in traffic, so she's not sure. She wasn't sure she'll be home in time to join. So I'm definitely no Dr. Pat. She's one of Guyana's main and most passionate food scientists. And although I feel very strange and misplaced on this panel dealing with such a serious scientific topic, because my eyes tend to glaze over whenever any form of science is discussed, I think I can offer a few thoughts, since I was drafted into working with a couple of teams from the Faculty of Earth and Environmental Sciences at UG to really deal with the question of gender in a number of projects and consultancies they were doing. And so I think this experience gave me some insights into gender and the agricultural industry, and particularly how these are impacted by climate change. And I'd like to share these thoughts. Now, one of the things in terms of all of the projects that I worked on, they all had some version of their rationale, objective, outputs, outcomes, activities, some version that said that the project will organize and carry out activities in such a way that ensures that vulnerable groups, and one of these vulnerable groups has always been identified as women, and the other being Indigenous people, will benefit from the project fairly and equitably, including through their active engagement. So all of these projects, it appeared to me, had the intention of mainstreaming gender into the project design and implementation processes. What was clear, though, was that although the project's intended to track and promote efforts in Guyana to explore options to generate climate-proof agricultural production, the impacts of the challenges on agriculture and food production and food security were evident to those in the sector, especially in the government agencies. But the social and gendered consequences and the repercussions of climate change and climate variability, these were less clear. Even less clear was, and this is because data isn't routinely collected, was the gender division of labor in the agricultural sector and the distinct experiences of and constraints faced by distinct smallholders such as female or male headed households, single parents household. And so in the absence of baseline data, ready answers to a number of questions, whether including such as whether the shift to climate smart agriculture was economical, whether it was socially progressive, in terms of resource allocation, etc. It was very difficult to ascertain this. As mentioned before by Ms. Paris, Guyana's population is rural-based, 17.5% based on our last census of our working population are involved in the agricultural sector, and this is more than any other sector. Women, though, have a significantly lower participation rate than men, at least based on the census, 4.1% versus 23.2% in the agri sector. They, however, have a significantly higher percentage working as unpaid family workers in the agricultural sector. So what it seems to me is that women's lower rate of employment in the agricultural sector is captured in the censuses in a way that really does not count or value their involvement in the sector. So I was trying to get some statistical data to evaluate the scope and scale of women's involvement in the agricultural sector in Guyana, and I literally couldn't find any. There was no regional statistical data, for instance, dealing with the number of hours women engage in farm work, the types of farm work they performed. There was, information on what they did, but in terms of the number of hours performing specific types of tasks, that wasn't available. The numbers, for instance, employed on wage employment versus those employed on their own family farms, the scale of their access to resources, land, financial, state extension services, their role in decision-making processes, and how did these roles change over time. So while all of these projects spoke to gender equality with little or no statistical data disaggregated by gender, it was literally really difficult to produce a gender action plan that was truly effective. And so, one of the first things that I want to say in terms of this entire discussion is that there is clearly a need for the adoption and implementation of a long-term, high quality and gender data collection strategy on agriculture and labor production, as it is, I think, with virtually every sector. So in terms of my own analysis, based on over a 3-year period, multiple focus groups, scores of interviews with women involved in the agricultural sector all over Guyana, I began to kind of vulnerability to the adverse effects of climate change. They practiced gender division of labor in their agricultural production. So based on the information that was gathered, things like land clearing, digging up of drains, these were done by their male partners, or in the instance of the single female farmers, they employed male laborers on an as needed or seasonal basis to perform these tasks. So Women and men tilled the land, but women were involved in weeding, watering plants. They picked very small fruits and vegetables. They noted that the men didn't want to do that at all. They transported crops from the farm to the home or to market. They stored and processed the produce. They went to the market and sold the produce, and they did the bookkeeping. So in terms of the overall analysis, it appeared as though women contributed more time and they performed more tasks. Men performed tasks that required the use of strength. But women farmers in these domestic partnerships, notwithstanding the greater time and in fact the greater number of activities they perform on the farms, they all viewed the man as the farmer and all characterized their role in the agricultural process as simply helping out. So they said, I would help out my husband. You know, my husband, I just help him out, and I do all of these different things. It's important to note as well that in addition to all of these tasks, they were also involved in childcare and domestic duties. None of them received or paid herself a salary or wage for their farm work. They all reported that climate change, for instance, had a significant effect on them over the past 3 to 5 years in terms of decrease in productivity, and that they were facing issues such as flooding, pest infestation, and saltwater intrusion. None of them earned enough from farming activities to escape poverty, and about 2/5 of them had a second form of employment, most as security guards and others as domestic workers. All experienced restricted or unreliable access to water, energy, and technological resources. And all desired to expand their production and diversify and knew what they could do and had great plans, but they experienced constraints such as limited access to land, water resources, capital, and technical resources. So they had a number of activities and actions that they proposed. They proposed that they required improved water resource management, including the construction of conservancies, dams, and reservoirs to improve drainage and irrigation. They talked about the development of engineering solutions to address the distinct drainage and irrigation needs of rice, cash crop, and livestock farmers, noting that rice was prioritized and they were often flooded to facilitate drainage of the rice fields. They also talked about improved pest management control systems to prevent the destruction of their crops. They were very interested and excited about the possibility of shade house technologies and other techniques such as raised beds. And they spoke to the development of government policies to secure regional and international markets for cash crop farmers in a similar manner to their interventions to secure markets for rice and for sugar crops. They also mentioned the establishment of state financing, grant and credit on decent terms for small and for women farmers. And they noted as well that they would really, really appreciate timely and accurate weather and climatic forecasts and projection. And two other recommendations from these women were establishment of community managed agro-processing facilities so as to eliminate wastage and increase access to farmlands and clearing of farmland. So throughout this consultation process, in closing, the key findings of my qualitative study was that the dominance in terms of gender notions and roles in the agricultural sector, and especially on family farms, where men and women are assigned specific places in the home and on the farm. This was confirmed. These invariably placed men in positions of authority and power, while women occupied subordinate and very vulnerable places. Women were also faced with a number of productivity constraints, some of which did not necessarily impact as heavily on their male counterparts, including their inability to perform labor-intensive farm-related tasks, And so they had a consequential need to secure additional labor to perform the same. And while such labor would be, might be available, it was often unaffordable for them, considering the scale on which they were working. And so they often had to rely on their children, and their children didn't necessarily have the strength to perform some of these tasks effectively. They were still engaged and preoccupied with caregiving and home care activities, which of course reduced the available time for them to engage in farm activities. And as noted by the first speaker, Mr. Baugh, women have less access than men to critically needed productive assets, water, arable land, and of course, financing, which was important. What I think I want to finally end with is that women signaled their intention to remain in the agricultural sector, notwithstanding all of the challenges that they faced. So the question is, and I definitely can't answer it, what could be done, adopted in the sector in a gender-sensitive manner that could help both rural men and women who face extremely high unemployment to create sustainable livelihoods in the agri-sector? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of our presenters so far. You guys have certainly given us a lot to think about. And we still haven't answered the question really, is gender equality important to achieving food security? And I think my personal opinion is because of the population size of the Caribbean and Guyana, it's a matter of all hands on deck to achieve this goal. And we certainly recognize and pointed out a few of the challenges that persons face with becoming fully involved in agriculture, not the least of which is climate change. I always remember there was a seminar at Convention Center, and one of the students from the Guyana School of Agriculture says, you know, we go to school, we get a degree in agriculture or diploma in agriculture, but then we have no land to practice on. We should be really given at least a plot of land, even if it's temporarily, to be able to practice on. Now, I don't know what the makeup of the gender profile of the Guyana School of Agriculture is, but I'd rather suspect that you have more and more women who are signing up for agricultural classes. And so if as a student, they can recognize that the story of wanting persons to be more involved in agriculture, particularly in Guyana, is to be ring true, we need to ensure that resources are applied towards making that a reality. So here is how we're going to work the questions, because we're here until 8 o'clock. And so we've got 1 hour and change to make this a really interactive experience. I want to whoever, if you'd like to make a contribution or to ask a question, please raise your hand. I will recognize you, and then you will make your contribution. We want to make sure that we involve as many people as possible. So please make your contributions brief and allow the presenters to respond with adequate time. Thank you very much. Who wants to go first?
May I?
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much. And may I congratulate all the presenters. And my questions are specifically, how many women currently in our agriculture sector are actually accessing drone technology to better enhance their access to their farmlands for drainage and irrigation purposes, and as to check up on crops? For example, for all those women farmers, those groups that I saw listed in Region 1, is there one group that is versed that can operate? There's a drone pilot in that group that can use and harness technology to better enhance their agro processing. I thank you.
Thank you. Before anyone takes a stab at it, let me recognize Sandra Granger. And you may go. Ms. Granger, you have your hand up?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay,
Yes, we can.
I want to commend the three panelists because I think they touched on some very important issues pertaining to our food security, particularly in a country which has almost equal gender distribution. Because women are, it's about 51%. And therefore, I don't see an issue with having more women engaged in agriculture. And Melissa raised a very important point that women work in agriculture, but they don't recognize themselves as key stakeholders in the production of agricultural produce. So the first thing is the imperative of getting empirical data on the women involved in agriculture before we can even think of determining the importance of women in food security. The second thing I wanted to ask, and this goes to Ms. Harris's presentation, she reported on groups in regions 1 and 9. Are there any other data on the groups in the other regions, the other 8 regions of Guyana? Because we do have rural and indigenous women farming in 2, 3, 4, right through, okay? Kuyuni, Mazaruni, Patara, Siparuni, and the rest of it. So we need to really have, and this goes to Melissa's point about getting the kind of data we need to see where women are really placed in agriculture. Secondly, I thought the issue of access to financing and training are important factors, because once women get the crops out of the ground, for instance, how do they add value to their product? How do they prepare for market? And how are they assured of a livelihood, a decent livelihood out of agriculture to ensure that they want to go to food security and are able to benefit from the kind of production techniques that will help them be rich while they are producing food for people. I think everybody wants a comfortable life. So I thought that the three presenters focused on specific aspects, but they all focused on the same thing in the end, which was basically we need to really sit our heads down and think about how we get the kind of data we need to really plan for developing our agro industry so that everyone can benefit, and women in particular can benefit, and they can have access to information on the kind of crops which are more marketable and the kind of facilities they need to keep their crops fresh, right? And the first participant mentioned drone technology, but there's a whole other range of things that can be accessed so that women can really play a viable role in food security. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then there's one other question. I think it's posed by Omati. And she says, thank you, Dr. Eiffel, for your presentation. Can you say if there was any data on how the women cared for their families whilst doing farming responsibilities, and particularly on childcare, but also more specifically on the topic today, were these farmers producing to address their own food security or the food security of their communities? So I'd like to give the panelists a chance to respond, and then we'll take another 3 questions and comments.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Remember to hold the mic up to your closer.
Yes. Yes. To address the question about the other communities, I believe that yes, we have there are there are two other groups in that are scattered not only in Region 9 and 1, but this information was supplied by the Ministry of Agriculture, and this project is, I guess, fairly new, so they did not give me the others. But I know that there is Wagnet, and that encompasses almost all the indigenous communities that falls on the ECA, and there's another one. I just can't. I'm still looking for the information. But yes, they are indigenous communities around Guyana that have and have been accessing help for their agro-processing activities. And the second question about gender at the Guyana School of Agriculture, it is almost 50-50. Almost. I think the females have an edge, but not a very large uh, percentage.
Thank you. That means that if we were to issue each student coming out of GSA a plot of land, at least temporarily, then we'd have it's more tangible effort to getting persons involved in agriculture. So the question of creating value with our agricultural products has come up, and I know Ms. Paris has been doing tremendous work with respect to that. I'm not sure, I know in lots throughout the Caribbean, of course, there's been a lot of efforts towards creating more value-added product, but it has not, and maybe Mr. Bach can speak to this, why it hasn't made a significant dent in our food import bill as a region. Right now, we have more locally produced value-added products on the shelves, such that we can reduce our food import bill as a region.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Before I touch on the value-added component, I'd want to just, even though it seems like a Guyana-specific question, but I'd like to just address quickly just the issue of drone training for females or women. I'd expand it a little bit more and not focus on drones only, but I'd look at technology. And it's a policy that governments across the region have been taking, where gender, climate change are cross-cutting issues that are used in all training programs. So whatever the training is in, there's a, I don't like the word, but I'll use it, there's a quota where there must be at least 25 or 30% female participation. But the aim, and certainly our practice, certainly in the division where I work, there is no training, there's no project that takes place that doesn't have a comfortable representation of women and youth. And I think if we're to keep that and expand that, certainly across all member states, we should see greater training in technology and the use of technology for not only women, but youth and all participants in agriculture. But it's true that what we're seeing now, certainly across the region, we're not satisfied with the level of participation of females in training, certainly in technology. And I guess we could look at some of the challenges that exist as to the reason. And I think it's important that we start moving to address that. And the challenges, certainly all three presenters spoke to that. In relation to agro-processing, it is true, yes, that we have a lot of local agro-processed products that are great, that are fabulous. However, there are challenges that really exist. One has to do with packaging, two have to do with production method, and three has to do with food safety. But all of this goes back to what I think it was Ms. Granger who put forward, and that's access to finance. because of the build-up and the natural build-up and the characteristics of most of the producers is that they're unable to access the finance that they need to effectively address these problems. Because if you're going to talk about production, then you speak about the plant or the facility and the upgrades that are needed for there. If you talk about the quality, then you talk about marketing, you're talking about promotion, and that needs resources to be do that. And if you look at the characteristics of the producers, they're small producers who still have the family responsibilities to deal with. They still have their own individual responsibilities to deal with, coupled by the challenges which exist. And I think it brings into sharp focus the need to have access to financing for these small rural producers, and not the access that we have now. Because some financing might be available, but you can't access it. You know, so we really need to take a creative look at that. And from that earlier discussion in a team meeting that I had with my team today, to see whether or not regionally we can carve out a growth fund for women within the region that doesn't require this stringent collateral requirement, and you have to get this from a pastor and a teacher and an uncle, because it's a known fact that our women producers, when they get into business, they are in it for the long haul, and you can see the results that comes from it. So I think that is what we really need to look at. How do we increase the access to capital, access to credit, which in itself will give us the types of products that we want? Because there's no doubt about the quality in terms of the taste and the functionality of the product. But packaging, food safety, and other things and production methods come into question. And that is what really makes the difference. Because as you produce more, then your costs move. As people demand more, then it moves from small scale to sophistication. So that requires a lot of training. It requires access to capital, access to credit, and among other things. And as you move up the value chain, then the requirements that you need becomes a little bit more complex than when you have a small scale production. So I would say, let us see how we can improve the access to credit, access to finance, and that will help to assist some of the problems which exist. Thank you much.
Melissa, did you want to speak?
Yes.
You're mute. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I did not, just to answer this one question, I actually did not encounter any women who used drone technology. Though I must confess that some of the younger women appeared intrigued when I discussed the possibilities of it, when we discussed the possibilities of it with them. The persons who were most familiar with the possibilities of drone technology weren't actually the farmers themselves. They were, in fact, young men and women who had been trained in agriculture, those who had been trained in either GSA or they had been trained at UG in the Faculty of Agriculture and Technology. But what we found is that missing in the training, or not necessarily missing, but maybe part of it could be enhanced, was this linkage of agricultural pursuits to entrepreneurship in a very kind of concrete way. So for instance, a suggestion that I would have heard in terms of, giving access to land immediately upon graduation, giving access to credit immediately upon graduation, because what we find with a lot of our graduates is that they're looking for jobs. They're trained, they're skilled, they understand how to use technology, they understand, how to manage, but they don't have the necessary base to be able to do so. And incidentally, we found this both with young men and with young women, but of course, young women were more vulnerable. On the question of the data, and whether there was any data on how women care for their families, qualitative data, no. But I did collect some quantitative data, and based on the interviews that I did, most of the younger children went with their mothers when they went into the farms. The older ones went to school, and when they came back, if the mother wasn't back home from the farmers yet, then they would go. Some of them did not go to school. No one actually had access to any kind of childcare. All of the women were producing sufficiently for themselves, so they could address their own food security, but all of them wanted to develop a livelihood from agriculture. All of them saw this as something that they could earn from over time and be able to transform their family's life. So while yes, they did produce for themselves, and what was interesting as well is that as I started to talk to them about what do you produce, there was a qualitative difference between what we produced in terms of our family farms. So they had a plot of land where they produced for their families, and then everything else where they produced for the market with the hope of getting their goods sold in the marketplace.
Thank you for that. I see the chat is hopping with comments and questions. Stacy and Annalise. Okay, let's go with Annalise first.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
I,
Protocols already established. My comment is more so based on the fact that while the presentations were excellent, I think we are solely looking at the topic from an agricultural standpoint, and probably we should try to cast a wider net as it relates to women who are not involved in the agricultural sector. While it's a huge topic and it would be a great undertaking, and probably time would be needed for another session on that point, I think that probably more policies should be aimed at making putting women in positions to be better able to access food, not only from the agricultural standpoint, but from one more so an economic standpoint, because there are many women who may not be able to be agriculturally inclined, but basically more job creation, more education, or policies that are more so aimed at reducing the food costs or alleviating some of the high prices that exist today on the market could lend to women being more able to access food and to therefore equip themselves in a better way to face or better the situation as it relates to food security. So basically, that was my contribution to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Annalise. Stacey?
Hi, good evening all. So my question was related to what was, sorry, give me a second, what was already discussed in terms of agro-processing and value-added activities. But what I was wondering, if there are actually any programs that are in existence currently that provide either financing or mentorship, because sometimes even if an entrepreneur may have the finances to carry out the business, right, they do need some amount of guidance along the way. And I was wondering if there are any programs that would help with this.
Thank you, Stacey. And Ms. Paris, I know this is your territory, so and your hand is up.
To answer the last question, I am not aware of the mentorship part of it, but it's something that I have been advocating, and I think that there are a couple of people who somebody at the GMSA. I was talking to them recently, and they are looking at. I think they're going to start looking at programs that does that. At GSA, we have also thought of it, Getting it to fruition is going to be, I would say, challenging, but it's something that I know that we are committed for. It's just that, you know, things sometimes take a long time to get off the ground. What I had my hand up about was when we talked about p women not being not inclined to get paid for the work that they do on the farm. I believe we have to start with our mindset and our girl children. We have, well, not only girl children, boys too. We have to start um, encouraging them to start looking at their own employment. There was a time where you were told to take in your education and get a good job. That has passed, and I think we now have to start telling our children to take in our education so that you can create your own employment. That is an uphill challenge, but I believe it starts as small as you can make it. So that if not everybody is going to be inclined to be their own entrepreneur, but you can see some children have the natural knack for it. That is to be encouraged. And so, how do we do that? I think we have to start in the schools. That is the, or in the home, because in the home, I believe that when the very few farm families have children who want to be farmers. They don't see the money, all they see is the hard work. And so we have to change that so that they can see the money behind it, and to be encouraged to continue, or to get into the field, because right now the young see agriculture as hard work. It is not hard work anymore, at least from my time to now. It has improved a lot, but I'm sure there is still a lot more improvement. In terms of agro-processing, mentorship will help. The programs have to be designed. There's so many hurdles that the young entrepreneur or the young agro-processor has to jump through. And even at the end, you may have a good product, but until you have all the other things in place, that product cannot move to the next level. We have a chicken and egg situation, in the sense that if we start to do well and we get a good product and we are expanding, we need more raw materials. A lot of times the raw materials will dry up, because although we have a lot of this, it is not a lot when you put a machine to it. A machine is going to cut or peel 600 pounds of cassava in an hour. That is just 1 hour. So you have to know, but in order for us to move into the real commercial side of things, we have to encourage our farmers to plant more. But at the same time, we have to have the industry ready to take more. And that is a whole different conversation. Oh, before I got the numbers for the males and females at GSA. It is 53% females, 47% males.
Thank you for that. So there's 3 persons with their hands up now. The chair of the commission, Ms. Chandapal, you can go ahead, and I recognize Chioma after you, and I think Diorani after Chioma.
Why don't you go ahead with the others? I can come in at a later stage, it's fine.
Okay, very well. So Chioma, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. If you're speaking, you're still muted. There you go. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm very new here. Mr. Brian Edwards was the one who recommended that I attend this Zoom today. And I'm so much in debt to him because I've met Brian not so long ago, but it is an amazing journey. One of the things I am doing is basically into agro-processing and agriculture on a different level. I have been in the Netherlands for some time at the Wageningen. I had the professors here in 2018. We were doing some stuff in agriculture. And, you know, I'm always thinking women empowering women. I'm about to begin an agro-processing facility on the Kurukuru Highway. And it is going to be focused mainly on girls and women. It's also going to be community development and all these. We're focusing on so much, it's unbelievable. Where I am thinking of giving the community a different aspect. I want to put in and not to take out much. I have recently said to myself, global gap is one of the main things that Europe needs in terms of exportation. No global gap, no chances. So I take on the oath, and I've asked the professor from Wageningen to be a part of such an exercise. So I'm going to be the one having him come down here, and I'm looking for farmers really right now. I don't care how much persons they are involved, but I'm willing to stand all expenses just to be able to have our farmers certified. At a later stage, I'm going to take numbers, and I'm going to be calling this organization and giving some more details on this. So presently I have 32 certificates in agriculture, and this is from cocoa right down to avocados, which avocados and coconuts and stuff is going to be the must-have products by 2030. And in my community development, I'm implementing 60 seeds per household every 2 months. So each house would be given 60 high quality seeds every 2 months. When the seeds are germinated and the plants are 12 feet in height, I'm going to take that back and I'm going to pay that person $2.50 US per plant, which we will give to the farmers in the community. And we are going to be using those products to process them. The monies that we will be getting from the plants, it's going into the community development lights. We're going to have a brotherhood security system from 6 to 6. I say this to let persons understand. With the certification, I am willing to take as many names as possible, and I'm always on the women's side. We're always right until somebody said move to the left. So I'm willing to have persons come on board for the training. I will provide everything for you guys, and we will do this together. I was at the recent launching of the investment, the agri-investment stuff they had at the conference center, and I'll be part of that on the 19th to the 21st of May. But with that, I'm willing to visit offices and we will have stuff done. So here is it for certification, global gap. If persons are not aware of it, it's good agriculture practices, and it covers food security and food safety. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Chioma. You bring up a very good point about the necessity of being certified, particularly for export. So, dear Rani, you want to go forward with your comment or question?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your contribution.
Most welcome. I really appreciate this.
Dear Rani, you had your hand up. No? Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, Ms. Chandapal, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I must say that I'm enjoying this discussion quite a lot, and a lot of important issues were raised. I want to perhaps focus on a few of them, because there was a speaker, I think I don't know if it's Annalise, but someone who had spoken about the challenges that a lot of, I would say, young people have faced when they have to make those decisions with respect to farming. And I'll give you a few examples of the reality. So I came from a sugar estate, but I must tell you that in growing up, you were always told that you will never go back and work in the sugar estate. So that everyone who lived in the sugar estate, none of their children went back to work in the sugar estate. And I saw it happening in farming, because people are told that when you're a farmer, all you deal with is mud and sun, and you're seen as illiterate, and therefore forget the money and think about a white collar job and don't go into farming. And that seems to have been catching on, because a lot of you older folks would recall, and I see Ms. Grain just spoke earlier, that we all grew up in conditions whereby we were encouraged to have our farm, our kitchen garden, so to speak, and that used to provide for you, whether you plant your crops, whether cash crops, you have you rear your chickens, you have your eggs, those kinds of things. That's how we all grew up. When our mothers made a lot of children, that's how they sustain us, because we were self-sufficient in that way. Sad to say, what I have seen going around different parts of Guyana is that our women are not interested. Some of them, they're not interested in going out there and doing the farming. And they will say, oh, me, I don't have time to that. My mother did it, I can't do it. I'm able with the son, you know, that kind of thing they talk about. That's hard work. I can't even find cow mole. The land is overused, all kinds of things like that. So how do we make agriculture sexy? I remember at the university, we had a function there, and that was a question. I had to speak on something, and I asked, how do we make agriculture sexy so that the young people who are graduating from school with their CXC don't only have to think that when I have my CXC certificates, I will go find a job. That, I believe, is becoming so problematic. Having your qualifications, yes, but what are you skilled in? And this is something that we as a nation will have to think about. It's not only having your certificate that will help you to read and write and do a proper letter and to do and find the technology to help you with what you have to do, but they also need some technical experience. So along with the theory and the practice, they will be able to do even better. So how do we find that medium? And I would put that question to Dr. Eiffel. That is something university has to think about in terms of how do we get our young people who are graduating from university to want to, you know, get involved in agriculture, because we always talk about Guyana being the food basket of the Caribbean. You know, there are examples where people wanted to buy all our honey, but they started and then they find that, you know, people were not very, I would say, dependable. So you get one shipment and then you don't have another shipment. Similarly with our catchery. So these supplies is becoming a problem. Coconut you get and then you don't get. What is happening? So we have to teach people how to do crop rotation and how to ensure. There are lots of things we have to do, but we should not lose hope, because I think it is doable. And from some of the experiences we've heard today, I have every reason to believe that we can, you know, we can get over the hurdles now, but we can get better in the long term. there were two professors who had come to the university a long time ago when I think it was John campus, Tain campus was set up. And we decided to do, I don't know if Dr. Eiffel will remember that, but certainly Dr. Francis would recall that. We had the professors there and they were trying to look at what are the plans that are available in the community. And surprisingly, they said that there are lots of valuable plants that can be used in pharmaceutical that is just there as bush and people chopping it down, not knowing how expensive these things are and the things that we can do. You know, similarly with bamboo, you recall the people who had come and they were training our people to use bamboo effectively. So things have happened, but have not been sustained. So I think that is what we need to look at in a more holistic, a long-term way, is to ensure that our students must understand that having the theory is fine, but you also need to have the practice to do something. And we also need to look at all the support systems that are required. They have been pointed out, so there's no need for me to repeat those. We need those systems in place. And we also need the data, and there's more help that must be given in the regions by the extension workers to ensure the land is suitable, the crop that are being used, you know, what land is good for, what crop is good for what land kind of thing. People need those types of help. That technical help must be given. So there is a lot of work to be done, but I'm not pessimistic about this at all. I believe we can make it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I see Zoom user and I see Tisha Mangra, but before we go to you, I want to involve some of the comments that are in the chat. So the question from, I think it's Margaret Lawrence, is what programs are in place to provide employment for young women who have crossed the gender stereotypes to pursue a career in agriculture? Case in point, a young relative of mine graduated last September from GSA with a diploma in agriculture. However, applications to GSA, NARI, GDF, MOA, the Guyana shop leaded no results, no positive results. And the president has said that Guyana is pursuing a path to make the Caribbean self-sufficient. And how are we going to do that if we don't involve and encourage our youth? Dolores Robinson in Trinidad says, here in Trinidad, our transition home for vulnerable women embarks on vulnerable community managed vegetable farming. This means every aspect of farming is done by women, from preparation of land to the reaping of produce. Her question is, what percentage of these agri products in the second presentation are headed by women? Nadia Salek says she's a community life competent certified facilitator, and she's asking if there are any systematic community awareness or enlistment programs to combat the challenges of having more females involved. If not, she is willing to submit a proposal. And of course, Sharon Jupiter, she's supporting Dr. Eiffel's presentation. And she notes that 60 to 80% of women influence food security in third world countries, but they're not recognized as farmers or local business entrepreneurs, and only as assistants. The men stand to gain from financial institutions despite we are the nurturers of those creative ideas. Alexis David says that she's a communications major. She's also a public servant, a mother and a grandmother, and a caregiver for many. She has a small business, but in poultry, and she finds that women need a lot of training in technology, packaging and training, financial grants. In Region 3, there are many like herself and who are just working on farms, and they don't know how to market their products. Of course, is there any help available for persons like that? Karen Cummings says that in her opinion, or rather in addition to what the other colleagues have said, I firmly believe we must stress the importance of finance, through it grants, loans, or direct government intervention. We must improve in areas of research so that we could have the data to inform policy. There should be consideration for a resilience plan for women farmers that includes the need for good drainage, irrigation, water resource, and conservancy management, and that women should be privy to early warning signs for their work. Stacey James asked if the use of non-timber forestry products can present an opportunity for sustainable economic growth, and additionally, in planning activities to support for security considerations, unprecedented events like the pandemic. And she agrees with the comments made with respect to using technology to improve security. So I'll stop with the chat for now, and I will go to Zoom user. Okay, maybe not. Tisha Mangra.
Good evening, all.
Good evening.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on young persons in agriculture, especially women. I was listening to the conversation, and I do agree that agriculture is a bit tedious. Firstly, let me introduce myself. I am Tisha Mangra from the Agriculture Innovation and Entrepreneurship Program that was launched in January by His Excellency President Dr. Irfan Ali. It was birthed to give young qualified agriculturists the practical aspect of agriculture, while simultaneously we become entrepreneurs. Our company is primarily made up of young women with a ratio of 60 to 40, the 60 being young women. It is also being led by 3 young persons, 3 young women. Our agriculture sector is indeed transforming, and we have an aim that we are working with to reduce importation. Women are getting more and more involved, and I love it. I can see this happening with a lot of young persons, and I'm excited about the future of our company because of the inclusion of women. And we're also using climate smart technologies, which makes it a little bit easier for us. And we're also producing on a large scale, and we're producing high value crop. Our program is providing an awesome opportunity for young women, especially training them, because we are all theoretical at this point. We are just completed the University of Guyana, and now we are here gaining our training, our practical aspect. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Zoom user, you still would like to make a contribution? If you would like to, you need to unmute yourself. If not, could we go to Clyde Phillip?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, for acknowledging me. I'm just going to make a quick few comments and some recommendation so that perhaps it can be taken in the sense in which it is said, and another important webinar like this can be arranged. My name is Clyde Phillip. I'm an engineering professor, and I'm heavily involved with what we call CETAM in the region. And CETAM is the acronym for Science, Engineering, Technology, Agriculture, and Medicine, CETAM. Our colleagues in Guyana is very familiar with this because we are very pleased to be associated with the vision of President Ali. We are very pleased to be associated with the vision of President Ali. Madam Moderator, please permit me to recognize the presence of former First Lady Sandra Granger on this platform, who is also perhaps familiar with some of the things I'm going to share, having shared this information with her team, her leadership team in the past. Madam Chair, within recent times, the leadership of the CARICOM, of the Caribbean, has been expressing extreme concerns vis-a-vis the chairman of CARICOM, which is the president of Belize, has echoed some sentiments that are being discussed in this forum. Within recent times, the Prime Minister of Barbados have echoed similar comments as expressed on this forum. As a matter of fact, the mantra of the Prime Minister of Barbados, Honorable Mia Mottley, is grow what you eat and eat what you grow. About a week ago, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Professor Sir Hilary Beckle, echoed a major concern, and all of these concerns is on YouTube, that the Caribbean in general and Barbados in particular is a sick nation because of the NCDs, because of the poison we have been imported over the years from the first world country. Madam Chair, the conversation is now changed because we have recognized and realized that we have to move beyond talk and meetings to actions. One of the challenges that we are fearful of as far as Guyana is concerned, and not only Guyana, but the Guyana-Suriname-Brazil basin, because as you're well aware, that Guyana-Suriname-Brazil basin is now the attention of the world, because we know now it's the financial location in the world. And we are very fearful that things that have been put in place over the last few months can be eroded because of the influence of what we'll call the first world nations. In particular, Chair, the concerns of President Ali, the concerns of Mia Mottley, the concerns of the Vice Chancellor of the UWI, we are concerned that this can be eroded by the importation of foreign taste in Guyana. We are very concerned. Having said that, Chair, my question is, where is GAPE, that's the Guyana Association of Professional Engineers, on this forum? Where is the medical profession on this forum? Because as I said, CETAM is science, engineering, technology, agriculture, and medicine. I have the answer to you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, every Tuesday, there is what we call the TNT, that's Tuesday Night Talks, which is sanctioned by the Guyana Association of Professional Engineers. I would like to humbly suggest, Chair, that a particular program be set up probably next week, Tuesday, or the following Tuesday, where issues like these now can be taken to the next level, because we are about implementation. It's not talking again. The rate of growth in Guyana now is rapid, and we are very fearful that foreign taste can overshadow our efforts in growing what you eat and eating what you grow, as is mandated by President Ali, Mia Motley, the chairman, the president of Belize, who is chairman of CARICOM, and the vice chancellor. Much more to be said, Madam Chair, but I will pause here with a request that an invitation can be extended from this important meeting to our Guyana Association of Professional Engineers Tuesday night talks, where it can be expanded. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and I certainly will make a note of it, and we'll certainly reach out to Gabe to have a collaboration, particularly on this important issue. So food security, we've been looking at it from basically the agricultural end of it, and as we know, to get from farm to table, it's a chain, and a chain that Ms. Paris has certainly made quite an input on in terms of agro-processing. It has been pointed out that there is a need for improved packaging. There is a need for production methods to be improved, and also more an increased use of technology with farming. Farming, as you should know, is different, and it has to be different from the way our foreparents did it. It should not be, and it cannot be, if it wants to be relevant, as labor intensive as it is right now. I know of farms that are set up, not necessarily in Guyana, whereby the use of technology is almost paramount. There is very little human intervention with respect from planting to reaping. I think it's only at reaping, even at reaping, they have a robot to do the reaping. Everything is monitored from water and nutritional inputs, and pest control is monitored through the use of computers. And as you should know, there's an increase in soil-less farming that happens. And I know one individual here in particular, I think it's Savannah Produce. They're heavily into soil-less farming, and it has cut down a lot on their inputs with respect to pest control. I say this to say that when to get involved in food security, it's not just the image of it just being the backbreaking end of things has to be dispelled. And certainly to get young people into it, we need to recognize that there is a chain, a supply chain that that we need to take into consideration throughout in this process of being a food secure nation. I heard the comments of Mr. Philip with respect to us developing foreign tastes. But I think more and more we are recognizing that the foreign tastes are kind of local, because we have been increasing our production of what we're calling non-traditional products. I had a meeting the other day with some folks who are producing grapes, cauliflower, broccoli, carrots, potatoes, onions, garlic. So more and more we're experimenting with with new foods. And I think the latest product, and Grace can probably share a bit more on this, we're going to be testing the growth of wheat. So certainly exciting things are happening in agriculture, but we need to really, as been pointed out, need to change the image of agriculture, what it means when, what is conjured up in our minds when we talk about food and talk about food security. And to know that there are several opportunities along that supply chain for persons to get involved with. So let me allow the panelists to respond to the comments and questions that have been posed.
I could go first and after?
Yes, you may.
I just wanted to note, because there was a question on financing for small farmers or persons who are involved farming on a micro or small scale. And I know that there are a number of government projects that offer financing for small and micro farmers, such as the REAP project, but part of the problem is that these target specific geographic areas. So if you don't fall within a geographic area that the project is targeting, then of course, you can't necessarily take advantage of it. There are other organizations such as IFAD. IFAD through the WADNET network has actually done quite a lot of work with women agro-processors, and they continue to build the capacity of women agro-processors throughout Guyana. And FAU has also implemented several projects, including several that I was involved in that offered credit training and mentorship, very important because I heard that mentioned as well, to budding agro entrepreneurs. The problem is, for most of these activities, the support is restricted to the life of the project. So I was involved in several projects in which, support was offered in terms of mentorship for 8 months, but then the project came to an end. Then what? The support in terms of training and capacity building initially offered, the youths benefited tremendously, but I will tell you, 2-3 years down the line, they still call me, Miss, when are we going to have another program? Could we do this? So we try to kind of organize them into little groups so that they could, build capacity, not just locally, but groups regionally. And that helped in some regard. But some of the key issues in relation to financing, in relation to access to land, in relation to, ensuring that the lands that they got access to didn't flood. How could they get their goods to market? All of those were issues that these projects couldn't necessarily address, right? So yes, we trained them. Yes, we gave them some microcredit to start. Yes, we offered mentorship, but then in the long term, the sustainability of their enterprise, not many, 3 years down the line, are still involved in the business that we had supported them to set up. Currently, I know FAO is focused on building capacity and supporting the capacity of farmers organizations, with the hope that these farmers organizations will then build the capacity of their member farmers. And I think this is a strategic kind of focus rather than targeting individual farmers. You target the organization, build their capacity so that they could in turn support their members. My own assessment of these farmers organizations, those that many of them were small, their capacity was very limited. And they were formed almost in response to a kind of external stimulus. And so they weren't necessarily, autonomous, indigenous kinds of organizations that had a specific focus. Nonetheless, I do think that their capacity could be built. As it relates to UG, we do recognize that we need to really think through a lot more how we could get our young people involved in agriculture, particularly those coming out of the Faculty of Agriculture and Forestry, in a way that they're not engaged on the basis of, I want to find a job. And yes, we do have to find ways of making agriculture sexy. The possibilities with technology, they're limitless, they're innovative, they're exciting. The problem is, I don't think we've quite figured out how we can get there, how we can get these young people access to all that they need to have access to so that they could actually take advantage of the technology that exists. UGBC does have, that's University of Guyana Berbice campus. We do have an agricultural focus, but admittedly, it can be scaled up, and we're trying and we're thinking through the integration of technology and how we could make, for instance, UGBC a kind of specialist campus to in part really address the question of agriculture. So anyone who wants to do agriculture can possibly go to UGBC. We are partnering and expanding our partnership with industry to give our students relevant experience. And we are also about to build out the newly established Institute for Food Security, which is situated in the Faculty of Agriculture and Forestry. And finally, we are building our collaboration with our sister universities in the region, because we face so many similar challenges. And I'm talking about Anthony Common, Suriname, University of French Guiana, to increase our capacity and engage in joint collaborative research and training on a myriad of agricultural and ecological themes. So I know that there is a lot to be done, but I think in small pockets, the work is beginning. The question is sustainability and ensuring that what we do is sustained over the long term, that we continue to follow up, that we continue to work with the persons that we originally identified, and that we stick with them through the long haul until they reach the point of maturity and they no longer need the kind of hand-holding and guidance. And I find that this is particularly true with our young agri entrepreneurs and our women agri entrepreneurs. They need support over a long period. Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's coming up to program time, as they say in Radio Land, but Mr. Barr, Ms. Paris.
I would agree. I would like to agree with Dr. Alfil a lot on the mentoring and coaching. What some of these, what I've seen so far is that some of the projects are not, I don't want to say not thought out properly, but we haven't looked at the market end of it. At the end of the day, we have to sell that product to somewhere. Guyana products, we are a small nation in terms of population, and so we're not going to make any much money buying among ourselves. We have to export. And exportation is a major challenge. It has a lot of hiccups that we may not be ready for. And if we don't know about the challenges, then when you are faced with it, then it can be daunting. What has to happen is that, in my opinion, that are if you have a market for something that let's casrip. Everybody knows casrip as it is in Guyana. It's kind of seasonal and so forth. But when you want casrip, can we get 45 gallon barrels of casrip? I don't think so. And so and that is our major challenge. We are willing, we are we're not ready for the international market because we have a good product, but we don't have a lot of it. And bulking up to another level is going to take machinery and a better supply chain. And so at first I told you about the chicken and the egg. Which do we develop first? And that has to be ironed out. I don't have all the solutions, but I sincerely believe that that is the crux of the matter. In mentorship, we can mentor, but at the end of the day, we still the students still have to live, so they have expenses. When you get into agro processing, it is I keep telling them that it is not for the faint-hearted. You have to really love what you do, because you will get frustrated along the way, and if you don't like it or love it, it is going to be burdensome. So we have to make sure that you are in the right, you have an idea, do the market research. And a lot of times we don't have the tools to do correct market research. Who is the market? Where does the market lead? What are the other players in that particular market? So it's not only about making and producing, but the marketing part of it and the distribution part of it is very challenging, and we have to find a way around it. Knowing the problem is maybe half of the solution. We should be able to find a solution, because I may not have the answers, but then somebody else would have the answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ba, do you have a comment?
Thank you much, Madam Moderator. Let me first say I'm really I really welcome the comments, the questions which have been asked. It displays a level of enthusiasm to agriculture, and just to answer the question, we're becoming sexy. As when I speak to young people in the sector, I've said to them the most money I've made in my life has been from agriculture. And I think, like most of us here, we've been through the entire school system. And I find it to be the most rewarding activity anyone can do. I just want to say that there's a lot of activities happening despite the challenges that we see. The time is now. We're seeing the momentum. We have we have in the region strong leadership led by His Excellency Irfan Ali. We're seeing our international partners rallying. I mean, we've not seen so much interest in a long time in agriculture, and we're happy for that. It says that the work is happening, the interest is building, and I'm saying press on, as the openings are there. As I say to people when I speak to them, agriculture, whether we believe it or not, has the most career of any profession in the world. And I challenge anybody to prove me wrong. It has the most career, from animal science to research to crop science, from food technologies, the works. It does have that. So the opportunities are there. I'm saying that women, certainly in Guyana and across the region, the opportunities now. Time to step up to the plate, claim your rightful place that you've been doing over the years. The recognition time is now. I feel it happening, I see it happening, and I think the next time we'll meet, I think you'll say, boy, we have too many people in agriculture. That's what I want to hear, and too many women. So, I mean, it's 8 o'clock, so I'll pause now and just thank you for inviting me. And just as I've said before, we here at the CARICOM Secretariat are here to work with the member states and provide any support that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I note the comments of Dineshwar Jai Prasad. Yes, we need to improve on the curriculum with respect to agriculture. And once government is involved, there's always going to be some level of red tape, and it's always going to be too much for the person who's trying to access services. And certainly the issue with respect to suicides in the farming communities is something that should engage our attention, and we need to come up with more relevant and working solutions. I see the comments on Tuesday night talks, and we certainly will reach out to Gabe to seek a collaboration. I do believe that agriculture is, as Mr. Boss says, is grabbing the attention of persons, ordinary persons, and our heads of state, and it's also grabbing the attention of financing agencies. Because at least COVID has taught us that while globalization was good, sometimes it's good to be more local, and we can't afford to ship our food in from external sources as we did once before, or wanted to. I think we're recognizing that in the age of low carbon development, that the steps our food takes from farm to table needs to be reduced. And certainly community gardens and persons in the community being tasked with supplying food to that community is certainly an interesting aspect. I do believe that our educational facilities need to do more research. They need to present information, relevant information to the farmers and to the students of agriculture in terms of types of varieties that farmers need to plant per their soil type, quantities of products needed to of produce you need to produce in order to meet demand for products like cassava, like casrip. It's 100 kilos to present to make one, I want to say a rum bottle full of casrip. So to make a 45-gallon drum of casrip, it's an astonishing amount, and I don't think that farmers can do that to provide 45, let's say 4 45-gallon drums a week. All right, so that information needs to be shared, and also the risk of getting into agriculture at that scale also needs to be managed. Certainly government could probably be able to provide that kind of support and cushioning just in case things go a little haywire. But as Mr. Boss says, it's 8 o'clock. I do appreciate everyone coming. We certainly will make notes and do something else on this topic, because we have not really began to touch a lot of the meat that this kind of topic requires. And I do appreciate you coming. Chair, would you like to say some closing comments? You're still muted.
No, I said it's no need for me to say anything. You've just said a lot, so it's okay. You just need to thank everyone, and you have done it.
Right. So thank you so much, Melissa. You've been a trooper. You stepped up to the plate. I want to thank Ms. Paris. I know you were a bit hesitant at the beginning, wanting to know what this was all about, and I do appreciate you making your presentation, and you certainly have given us a lot of ideas and food for thought. Mr. Ba, we certainly will be reaching out to CARICOM, because if Guyana is to become the food basket of the world, of the Caribbean, we could try for the world. But the Caribbean, it represents a major shift in production. And a major shift in production means more money is involved. And with risk, the higher the money available, the higher the risk. And I think we need to become less risk averse with respect to agriculture. Farmers need to get out of that mode of this is how we did it all our lives. We're not changing. We need to adapt to technology. We need to and grow different things and be able to market our produce in a much better way than we've been doing. But I think all in all, agriculture is, as Mr. Boss says, a very exciting sector, and it has room for everyone, and certainly for every interest. I want to thank you for spending your evening with us, and Women and Gender Equality Commission will do another seminar or panel discussion next month. I've seen a lot of friends. It's good to see you here. And I want to make sure that you stay good, stay safe. COVID is still about, may not be as much, but be good. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.
Josephine.